It's been amazing.
As headlines and social media conversations around hantavirus continue to spread,
Hantavirus.
many people are left wondering what the real risks actually are and how to respond wisely. In this town hall, Dr. Simone Gold and Dana Granberg-Nill break down what hantavirus is, who may be at risk, and what practical preparedness looks like without fear-driven messaging. Together, they separate fact from speculation and walk through simple, proactive steps families can take to stay informed, prepared, and confident.
Welcome to Gold Care Medical Town Hall. We are so grateful you are here tonight. And boy, do we have a hot topic for you. It seems to be all the media craze about hantavirus. Tonight, we have Dr. Simone Gold with us, founder and CEO of Gold Care. We also have Dr. Dana Granberg-Nill. She is the Chief Operating Officer at Gold Care. And a special guest who you didn't see on that intro video who is joining us tonight. Does not need an introduction, but we're happy to have him here. It is Dr. Robert Malone. Dr. Malone, thank you so much for being here tonight. Tonight, we are talking about the craze around hantavirus and giving you truth. That is what tonight is about. It is facts over fear, and we are giving you truth. We are so grateful to have you. We are happy to introduce Gold Care and some great new products to you from Gold Care that will help ease your mind if you should be concerned at all. But really, the best part of this conversation is about to come. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gold to get started here right now. Dr. Gold?
Hi, everybody. It is great to be here tonight. And as Drew said, all the rage, all the subject in the news today, these days, the last couple of weeks has been all about hantavirus. And of course, it reminds us all of what we went through the last 5 or 6 years. And so, of course, we have to bring you the straight information. One of the founding reasons why we launched Gold Care was we don't want the average person to ever again be held hijacked and held back due to medical fear. We saw a lot of that during the COVID years where people kind of felt something was wrong with the information they were hearing from the media or from public health officials, but they didn't really know where else they could turn to get solid, safe, accurate, unbiased information. So a big reason why we launched Gold Care was to give you access to the independent medical voices out there that are not really any other incentive other than the best for you, the best for the doctor-patient relationship. That is the reason for Gold Care. So I am very honored tonight. We always thankfully have our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Nill, but we have a special guest tonight, Dr. Robert Malone. And I'm very glad that he came to join us tonight. Many of you surely know him. You see him on various podcasts and his Substack. By the way, his Substack is one of 2 Substacks I always read. So I strongly advocate, if you're interested in anything relating to kind of freedom and medical freedom, things like that, government policies, he is, for me, one of the best sources that you can possibly subscribe to. So you can find him on his Substack. He is also, a very well-credentialed scientist, and he has a lot to say in the hantavirus subject, both from the scientific perspective and also the political perspective, because, of course, this is part of the story. So I'm just going to show you all a clip of World Health Organization. The director of the World Health Organization is a fellow named Dr. Tedros. Those of you who've been following me for years, I've had a lot to say about Dr. Tedros. We have a website called Who Controls Who, and you can find out more about Dr. Tedros there. But essentially, he's a hard left Marxist that was propped up by the Communist Chinese Party to lead the WHO. So the Chinese Communist Party has a lot to say about the policies that the WHO comes forward with. And wisely, our president, moved us away from the clutches of WHO authoritarianism. But why don't we open first with what we'll see what Dr. Tedros has to say about hantavirus. And he, of course, is very upset that the United States has left the WHO because, of course, we provide a major portion of their funding. But for those of you who remember COVID, we remember that the WHO came up with a lot of policies that interfered with our constitutional freedoms. And the WHO is behind that. Chinese Communist Party is behind that. So let's first hear from the WHO, from Dr. Tedros.
And any vacuum, any space which is not covered actually gives advantage to the virus. And the best immunity we have is solidarity. So because of the event that's happening now, and both Argentina and the US are affected, I think they will reconsider their decisions because they can see how important universality is for health security. Because viruses don't care about our politics, and they don't care about our borders, and they don't care about all the excuses that we may have. So I hope this could be a good lesson for the whole world, because solidarity is our best immunity. I repeat. Thank you.
Before we play our next video, we have another very short clip. What I should have said is that Dr. Tedros, of course, is addressing people about the subject of hantavirus, but note that he specifically calls out Argentina and the United States, and Dr. Malone will have a few words to say about that. But what I'm sharing with you now is that the United States and Argentina are two nations that pulled out of the WHO, and this is very, very upsetting to the WHO because it strongly not only affected their budget, the United States provides a lot of money, but also it kind of broke up the illusion that the WHO is the necessary master and arbiter of all of these things. And we're going to watch one more short video before we turn to Dr. Malone, because a lot of you are surely wondering, why am I hearing all about this? Why do we keep hearing about hantavirus day and night, much like we did in the COVID years? Here's a reason. Please, the next video.
Actually kind of intrigued me more, Natalia, about what you said is a colleague told me that there was like 100,000 articles written around the world on hantavirus in the last couple of days. And that's not typical for a hantavirus outbreak. Certainly there's always attention and people get scared, but like, that's the other thing with COVID. It was COVID 24/7. And then when you said in your intro about how it seems to be driven by influencers, I'm sorry if I'm getting too like, I don't know. I actually never want to use the word tin hat because I'm not a tin hat, but these patterns are anomalous. Why, with just this little outbreak of a few cases, suddenly like it's consuming the world's media cycle? Like, for instance, I'm on talking about it today. It's because it's being driven by something.
Right. So I definitely want to bring Dr. Malone into this conversation. Like I said at the top of when we just got started, that Dr. Malone is, of course, a very well-credentialed, esteemed scientist, but he's also really a Renaissance man, and he thinks deeply about the political and social, cultural environment in which we find ourselves, especially related to health issues. So, Dr. Malone, what say you? Why are we all talking about hantavirus?
I don't know what the motivation is. And that's just to be perfectly honest. But I completely agree with Pierre. What we're seeing is anomalous in terms of the signal. The signal being this media blitz. And once again, like we saw in COVID, and we've seen with so many other weaponized outbreaks, bird flu is a classic example. Of course, we remember monkeypox and many other examples. What we're seeing is what appears to be consistent with a strategy, let's call it that was well described by a fascinating gentleman. His name is Alexander Kosmanov. And he wrote in 2017 about the recent H1N1 outbreak that was just finishing up at that time. And that's been widely criticized in a variety of media. There was hearings in the European Union over the weaponization of information having to do with that outbreak. So Alexander Kosmanov is not just any other Russian. He's actually a Foreign Intelligence Service SVR officer that served under both the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation. And his specific area of expertise is biowarfare and information warfare. And he wrote a fascinating academic article that he titled Information Bioterrorism, was part of the title. I prefer to call it psychological bioterrorism. But in it, he laid out a series of steps and pre-existing conditions that are necessary to mount one of these propaganda campaigns. So I'm reading from our book, Cywar, we published a couple of years ago, that was one of the products of my trying to make sense out of what happened during COVID. And so let's see what Dr. Kosmanov has to say. He makes his living, by the way, now in consulting on these types of things. And he's the author of a book called Biological Espionage, Special Operations of the Soviet and Russian Foreign Intelligence Services in the West, published in 2005. So what makes psychological bioterrorism effective? Time factor. Psychological bioterrorism provides a practical method for immediate global transmission and development of widespread panic through electronic means of communication. Are we seeing that? Check. A vulnerability factor. Remember, you're the target of this, okay? You're the target of this weaponized form of information manipulation. Vulnerability factor. People feel helplessness when confronting the threat due to the lack of effective means of defense. This creates panic among the general population, which can then be directed or exploited to support other purposes. So hantavirus is almost textbook made for this, because we don't technically have a treatment for hantavirus. Why don't we have a treatment for hantavirus? Well, it's extremely rare. The risk that you as an American contract hantavirus is, well, let me put it this way. The risk of you getting struck by lightning is 7 times greater than the risk of you contracting hantavirus. It's very rare, and that means that physicians and the medical establishment haven't really had much of an opportunity to develop the capabilities, run clinical trials, design drugs, test alternative drug treatments like Pierre had championed with the use of dexamethasone, you may recall, early on in the COVID crisis. And we had a variety of other repurposed drugs developed, and this audience is well familiar with those, as is Dr. Gold. But we won't mention those, lest the fact checker harpies descend on us. But we haven't had this opportunity with hantavirus because it's so extremely rare. An uncertainty factor, a lack of factual information about the source of the bioterror threat and its spread, creates an opportunity to manipulate the masses of people who initiate the threat. Initiating and promoting a psychological bioterror event creates an opportunity to craft and promote an explanation of the event and to fashion propaganda narratives that serve or support other, typically hidden, objectives. Well, let's fast forward. What's one of those hidden agendas? Tedros, that Simone has introduced us to, the gentleman sporting the nice little goatee now, that's a new addition, in addition to the red tie. Tedros is feeling the burn a little bit of President Trump withdrawing from the WHO, and with President Trump went $500 million per year. So that's a little bit of a financial crisis for them. They're really on the thin edge anyhow, and I guess he's just going to have to go back to Bill Gates and get him to open up his wallet a little bit more. But he's under pressure, and he has pushed this international health regulations and the pandemic treaty, which many nation states have determined violates their sovereignty. The position of the WHO is that the world needs a unifying body that can adjudicate and manage epidemic or pandemic events, such as happened with COVID, and should have the right to place representatives or officers in other nation states to observe, monitor. They should have the right to prescribe treatment, so that Tedros would be telling you what drugs you can take and when you can take them, and what vaccines you should take, et cetera, et cetera. Now, since the WHO has a very, let's say gently, tight working relationship with a number of pharmaceutical companies that help capitalize it, you can appreciate the inherent conflicts of interest that derive from this. So the fourth key factor that Kosmanov mentions is a lack of control factor. Every person who accepts the promoted bioterror narrative develops and internalizes a sense of being out of control because he or she is a suspicious object, liable to have the disease, and therefore is a threat to everyone else. Sound familiar? Okay. And he goes through, he talks about the various roles, stages, actors responsible for deploying these. But here's the one I want to get to. What are the main stages of a psychological bioterrorism active operation? So this is an intelligence officer basically describing standard tradecraft for manipulating populations and nation states through the use of fear of infectious disease in this particular context. So this is what he says. If you're going to do one of these campaigns, and listen closely, because what I'm asking you to do is kind of make a mental punch list. Am I seeing those things? Is that happening right now? Okay, so here's the first one. Phase one of one of these campaigns. The executor, in many cases an intelligence service, we could call it the intelligence community in the United States or the deep state, with the help of supporters, ergo agents, and auxiliary means, ergo mass media, throws out false information. In one example, an imminent pandemic of bird flu onto the target audience, the public, with the pretense that it's real. So the fake information here that's being deployed is that you are at risk for hantavirus. Now, hantavirus in general is not readily transmitted between human to human. Andes is a exception in general, and that's the subtype virus that we're dealing with, is the Andes subtype of hantavirus. It's not a separate virus. It's kind of a member of that category. And Andes can, on occasion, be transmitted from human to human, usually involving body fluids. And I'm not going to get more graphic about what I mean by body fluids, but it could just be we're all having communal dinner and I'm sharing a spoon, or we're both drinking out of the same glass of water. There's a lot of different ways that this kind of thing can be exchanged. But the key point with Hanta that you need to remember is there is still no documentation of, here's the kicker, you ready? Sustained human-to-human transmission. That means not just that I get it because I was bird watching in the Andes or wherever, and I encountered some rodent feces, and me and my wife got it, which is one explanation for what happened here. And then we brought it back on the boat. But if I had that, then I infect person number one. Person number one then infects 2 or 3 other people. They infect other people. There's absolutely no evidence of that kind of chain of infection happening. If you don't have that, you don't have an epidemic. You can't get an epidemic unless you have somebody that is a steward on an airline. I'm referring to HIV in early days, that's flying all over the place and interacting with large groups of people, let's say in rave parties. Okay, but that's not what's happening here. And that is not really sustained human-to-human transmission. So phase one. Phase two, executors, supporters, and auxiliary means. I described what those were. For instance, the auxiliary means is mass media. Accelerate the problem, making it a hot topic. Maximum interest needs to be created. Once the false problem is created, it grows like a snowball, rolling and rolling, independently building size as though it's becoming a legitimate concern. You seeing anything like that? Of course, listen to what Pierre Corey said. The harmonized propaganda that's coming out in multiple channels all over the world. Phase three, the operation's actual objective is realized secretly. Monetary gains are obtained, government stability is undermined, ergo economic losses, and other planned impacts are achieved. The appearance is that one of those may be getting buy-in from Argentina and the United States to the purported role of the WHO and buy into the international health regulations and the pandemic treaty, which we have notably not bought in on. So if you're looking for a motive in all of this, one of them might be the conflict of interest that's inherent in the WHO, and that clip that we just saw illustrates it. As phase 3 is achieved, the target or general population is told that the problem is being solved and the risks are contained. Wait for it. I bet you're going to hear that in about 2 weeks. This is done with sideline information, news stories, social media posts, interviews, etc. However, ideally, the problem is left hanging so that the executor can use it again. Ideally, having successfully crafted, inserted, and amplified the fear narrative, the general sense of fear and anxiety about the risks of the psychological bioterror threat agent, for instance, hantavirus, should be maintained at a low level so that it's easy to resurrect for future use when you need it. So there's the rough outline as laid out by a Russian intelligence agent of how you run one of these campaigns. And it goes into a lot more details. You can read his academic paper. It's available from a variety of sources, and we've cited it in our Substack and in the book. But the point is that what we appear to be encountering is a classic example of deployment of this kind of strategy. And I argue that it is inherent in kind of, we could call it the machine, the mechanism, the culture. It doesn't necessarily require bad people. I mean, we like to poke at Anthony Fauci or Ralph Barrick or, name your evil character that gets stereotyped as if, they're some prototypic Bond villain. But really, the system is built in such a way that everyone on the entire chain of events in the amplification of one of these fear messages benefits. Think it through. The press, they benefit. The quote reporters, they benefit. They're getting clicks, likes, and follows. Their media outlets, whether it's CNN or the New York Times or NPR or whatever, they're getting attention because they're promoting this fear narrative. So you got the reporters are benefiting from it. The platforms are benefiting from it. What about the pharmaceutical industry? Oh, Moderna's stock has popped now because they've announced that they were developing a hantavirus vaccine against one of the strains, nothing to do with Andes. One of the strains that exists in South Korea, they're partnered with the South Korea company to develop an mRNA vaccine for hantavirus of the type that circulates in South Korea. But, Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street doesn't seem to, the market, Mr. Market doesn't seem to care. People go rushing to make investments. This is classic pump and dump behavior, by the way, in the biotech industry. They're another example of one of the kinds of winners that benefits from this type of propaganda. So the biotech industry wins. Now, what about the govies? Okay, well, the bureaucracy wins. They love this stuff because, number one, they get more power. Number two, they typically get a lot more budgets. If Tony was in right now, we would have Tony soon testifying in the Senate that, oh my God, this is an incredible...
Needs more budget, a bigger budget to fight this.
Absolutely. And I will make the threat magically disappear if you only give me X hundred millions of dollars. And you can go back on C-SPAN and almost superimpose this script on multiple past outbreaks. So the govies win, the bureaucracy wins, the politicians can act as if they're actually doing something, they win. The only people that don't win are folks like you and me that are subjected to this fear. And oh, by the way, one of the classic signs that you'll see is you'll have all of this hype and fear, and then a little bit more incremental authoritarianism, a little more power, a little more control. That's what Tedros is seeking. He's seeking more power and more authority to implement the IHRs internationally. And what you'll find is that the threat suddenly goes away. Nobody says, good heavens, it's gone away. It just kind of dissipates. But what doesn't dissipate is whatever new authoritarian policy is implemented.
So one of the
just the way, and then it's wash, rinse, and repeat.
Okay, so one of the things I want to share with people, by the way, I just want to share with people that Dr. Malone probably has to leave a little bit early tonight. So we shifted things around to talk about the political, social, cultural aspects of the whole thing. And we will also be getting to clinical conversation and, symptoms to look for, treatment if there's any available, and preventive measures and all of those good things, and who's at risk, if anybody, and all of that. So please stick through so you can hear that. But one of the things when you just mentioned about the authoritarian powers that people take in times of crises, I was thinking about the people on the boat. My understanding is that they were actually locked in their cruise ship rooms, right? And it's really completely the wrong approach. So that's what happens when the WHO is in charge, is that they take the power. They had the power, ostensibly, nobody stopped them, and they made recommendations, and the cruise ship locked the people in their cabins. I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah. So, and by the way, that's exactly what happened when the CCP did their lockdowns. I have a colleague, I actually bought a car from him. He's a Chinese American, and he was over in China during the time when the outbreak initially started. I'm talking about COVID. And even though he's fluent in Mandarin, he's not actually Chinese because he lives in Irvine, California, and that's where he was born. And so he's a second-class citizen. And they locked him in one of these hotel rooms and, put a bolt on the door and shoved the food under the door for him to eat. And he had to live that way for months. What you're hearing is classic CCP behavior. They really don't care much about people. They sit on billions of people. People are just kind of an object to be manipulated and managed, and they don't see things in terms of ethics, et cetera, in the same way that we do here in the West.
Right. So it's very important that people remember this. I think many people watching tonight do remember the pictures from China where some of the doors were actually soldered shut. They actually soldered them shut. Yeah, it was really unbelievable. But I want to wake people up. They did a very similar tactic on the cruise ship boat. So you're a cruise ship passenger, you land on this boat, and there's bad luck because somebody on the boat, there was rat droppings, et cetera. And so you're a passenger on the boat. Next thing you know, because of people like Tedros and the Chinese Communist Party running essentially the WHO, in my opinion, that's my opinion, all of a sudden you're locked into your cabin for the duration. And that's just how it is. And thank God that we're not subject to World Health Authority.
Well, it's even worse than that because a case. So we'll see how this plays out, and I guarantee we'll never hear what actually the investigation reveals, unless some poor soul like me gets called to be part of that investigation. But there's this story that's been propagated that this couple was on this landfill chasing some bird. Because they're bird watchers and they got exposed to rodent feces and contracted the virus, brought it back to the boat. A much more probable explanation is rats go on boats. That has been known for millennia. And I think, the thing that has to be proven to be false, the most likely scenario is that there was rodent feces somewhere on that boat, probably in some area where there was food preparation or air handling.
Yes.
And what happens with Hanta is it's not just rodent feces, solid rodent feces sitting on the ground. You're not going to inhale that. But when it dries and it becomes particulate, it becomes part of the dust cloud when you go into one of these areas, and that can happen also on a boat. And the simple Occam's razor here, the simplest explanation is that there was rodent fecal material somewhere available on that boat, and that would explain why you had so many individuals contract, apparently independently, this particular virus. So is what it's in the interest of the cruise ship and the cruise ship's company,
Exactly.
cruise ships insurers, to come up with an alternative narrative. And I understand that alternative narrative is already starting to be questioned. So
Right. So exactly. So we're going to go into like who's at risk, what the known risk factors are. Essentially, it's rodent droppings, and we're going to go definitely more into that. And I'm so glad you said that, because for me, this doesn't make sense that was the reason. The much more logical reason was there were rat droppings on the boat, etc. We're going to take a quick break to Drew. Dr. Malone, do you have a few more minutes, or is this like your exit moment?
Sure. That's fine.
A little bit more? Okay. So Drew, back at you, and then we'll get right back on it.
Thank you, Dr. Gold. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening. The conversation is already great. And thank you, especially to Dr. Malone, for sharing such great information. In the bottom of your screen, you see it right there. It says goldcare.com/Hanta. We have an awesome ebook for you. It's around 12 or 13 pages. And everything we are talking about tonight is outlined beautifully in that ebook. If you go to that page, click that link, goldcare.com/Hanta. You can get that ebook and you'll have all the information you need. Plus, we'll talk about a little later a few great new products we have in our Gold Care store to help you just be prepared. That's all we're asking, is that you're prepared and that you understand the truth of what's really going on here. Back to you, Dr. Gold.
So, Dr. Malone, we left off with you saying that, again, can't prove it. We don't know. But I agree with you that the most likely scenario is that there were rat droppings. So I think it was in your Substack where I read that you really need 4 things, the 4 conditions model that's necessary to get sick. So you need the pathogen, you need a sufficient quantity, which is also called the infectious dose. You need a route of entry into the new host and the new host susceptibility. And I just want to kind of introduce that concept to people. Not that we have to go into it so much, but there has to be a pathogen at the item that makes people sick, like the microbe. Then there has to be sufficient quantity of it. That can be affected by disinfectants, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then it has to get into you. And then the host has to actually be susceptible to the disease. I just want to frame it like that, because as a scientist, what you're saying is it's much less credible that someone picked up maybe a sufficient quantity or an infectious dose amount, out there bird watching, when we know that there's rats on cruise ships. I mean, that's a fact. Of course, there are rats on cruise ships.
Yeah, so that's the usual route that Americans would encounter hantavirus, is in the Southwest where it's dry and dusty. And they're poking around in old ghost towns or a cabin or something like that. They're cleaning up a cabin that's they haven't. There hasn't been anyone staying there for a while, and they're sweeping up the material, and some of that material happens to be deer mouse droppings. It's often deer mice in the United States. So that's the usual route, and I agree that the logic here, here's what you would have to say. This couple goes out, and according to the narrative, they go into a landfill environment. I guess that's supposed to signal they're going into a high-risk environment with a lot of garbage and rodents in that garbage. Okay, so you have a wealthy, elderly, bird-watching couple going into a trash pile in Argentina. Well, that's starting to stretch things a little bit. Chasing a bird that they haven't seen before. Okay, so presumably some rare bird that they're seeing. And then they're encountering this material, presumably breathing it, and then as a dust particle. And then they're coming back to the boat, and they have enough of that material then, or it grows in their own bodies, that they start shedding it. And somehow, I mean, we could imagine if this is a group of 20 somethings and they're using ecstasy and having a rave, we could imagine a scenario, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about elderly bird watchers on an explorer cruise ship. This isn't a Diamond Princess massive thing. And it just doesn't, the story doesn't hang. But now another thing that I love about the way you frame that is one of the things in, let's say, our community that our extended community, including various people that have strong opinions that are social media influencers, strong opinions about infectious disease, they often get caught up in this issue that goes back historically about whether or not it's the terrain or the pathogen. And I've always found that very artificial because it's both, right? And to your point, if the person has a well-developed natural resistance, so they're healthy, their immune system is functioning at 100%, they've got enough vitamin D on board, et cetera, then it becomes a lot harder for a fixed infectious dose to establish itself. And that person might seroconvert, but they might not develop disease. Right. And by the way, we're being told, this is part of the narrative that's coming across, and I don't know if you caught Deborah Birx with Scarf, talking about, well, we all need to be tested by PCR for hantavirus now. And the reason is because the evidence apparently on the ship is there's a lot of subclinical infections. Okay. And so we need to characterize, it's kind of residual. You remember COVID? So as if these subclinical infections represent a huge hazard. Well, if they're subclinical, that means they didn't get sick. And so it could be that they're getting exposed to a little bit of hantavirus, and that's enough to trigger natural immunity. And they're probably now resistant to hantavirus, bless their hearts, whereas a small number got a sufficient dose and or they were not completely healthy immunologically or otherwise. And so their terrain was weaker. And so they may have caught symptomatic hantavirus because their own systems were not completely up to par. So even though they might have got a small dose, that just the same as everybody else, it might be that they were more susceptible. So this world of virology and infectious disease is kind of complicated because it does have a lot to do with how healthy you are. And I suspect, Simone, that's something that y'all are going to talk about, is how with Gold Care you can work together with your physician practitioner to ensure that you are immunologically up to snuff and less likely to contract the random infectious agents that we all encounter in our daily life, unless we're going to sequester ourselves and go live under a rock.
Right. So actually, thank you. Yes, we are going to talk about things that are cheap and easy to do, that do not take fear to the next level, and things that you can control. So we try to give you the facts. So some of the facts, just to summarize, that Dr. Malone has gone over with us tonight that are relevant to you, the listener, in addition to the big picture, you personally in your home. This is a rare disease. This has been around for decades. This is typical. If you see it in America, it's going to be in what we call the four corners, right? It's the New Mexico and Arizona, Colorado, Utah kind of area. But most importantly, it's if you're going into like a very dusty area that had rat droppings that got really dry over time, and those rat droppings happen to be infected with the hantavirus. So this is a very rare, unusual situation, and it's been around for decades, and we're hearing about it. Perhaps consider that we're hearing about it because there's another motive, another reason that we're all being inundated with news stories 24/7 about hantavirus. I can tell you, as a very busy emergency physician for 25 years, who, by the way, I worked in the Southwest for a period of my career. Not only had I never seen a hantavirus patient, I never heard of anybody else who had ever seen a hantavirus patient. That means in all the hospitals I've worked with, all the colleagues I've worked with, that is how rare the thing is. It is, I didn't know it's 7 times more likely to be hit by lightning. The point is, this is a rare disease. Now, there are a lot of things you can do if you happen to be afraid, right? Some of the people on this call certainly are afraid, or they wouldn't have tuned in. And we are going to tell you the things you could do, to reduce your fear and the practical steps that you can take. But I'm so glad that Dr. Malone, that you were able to speak on this issue. And I think we're going to turn it over more to a bit of a clinical conversation. And we love having you, but at the same time, if you have other things that you needed to attend to, class could be excused. Like class can be excused for session.
I started the morning waking up at 4 a.m. in Boca Raton, Louisiana, and it's now getting to be my bedtime here on the East Coast. I'm of a certain age and I do need to get some sleep. So thanks for setting me free. And thank you for the opportunity to address your audience and participate in this and participate in the growth of Gold Care. I'm really enthusiastic. If there's anything that the world needs right now, especially here in the United States, it's an alternative medical system. And you have been tireless in trying to develop this. It was one of the topics yesterday when I was speaking to this group in Louisiana, is how do we get to an alternative medical provision structure? It's a hot topic, and you are at the forefront with Gold Care. And I just thank you for your service to your patients and to the nation, and your courage in doing everything you and your team can to advance these ideas and options so that people don't have to be tied just to the standard insurance model in corporate healthcare.
You seem to understand it. Thank you so much, Dr. Malone, a true medical freedom patriot. And please, everyone, consider subscribing to Dr. Malone's Substack. You heard it here. Dr. Gold always reads it.
Thank you, Dr. Malone.
Have a great evening. Thank you. So, Dr. Nill, thank you for being so patient. There's still so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about because I think people are actually most interested in themselves, and that's a normal, healthy position to be in. Like, how much at risk is a person, and what symptoms are there, and should I worry about this, and all of that. So we're going to get into all that kind of clinical stuff. I don't know if you just had a question you wanted to throw out or a starting point.
No, it's really hard to interrupt Dr. Robert Malone. So it was so interesting to hear his perspective. But as I was listening to Dr. Tedros and his comments regarding the WHO and Argentina and the US, I thought about how many of us experienced his remarks. They didn't ring true, but what he said was very true, that solidarity is very important. And I think that solidarity was weaponized in America, and we felt it. So when we had a president say that there would be a winter of death for people who didn't get a shot, we were the Argentina and the US on a national level. And then we had medical boards and friends and family. You know, there was definitely a trickle down effect from that solidarity. And so I'm just so proud to work with you, because you have had a vision that have brought people together, where this time around, 5 to 6 years later, not everyone, but many people have awakened to the fact that there needs to be a place where people can go to get accurate information and to prepare in whatever way they want. Maybe for them, it's just a holistic plan. Maybe it's just to join classes and learn so that they aren't afraid. And for some people, it's all out prepping. They want their pharmacy ready to go so that there's not a supply chain thing. So I did want to add about the solidarity and how I think that our desire as a physician that was in COVID, my desire was not to lose a practice that I'd worked for 20 years. But my desire to do the right thing ended up being stronger. And I'm very glad that you've created a place where people can come. We may not have the right answers right out the chute, but all of us are interested in working toward the truth.
Right.
And we aren't backed by the pharmaceutical or the insurance industry. So
right. So
that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. So it's funny. And then we'll get right into the heart of what people really want to hear about, which is there treatment? Is there, what should I look for? But solidarity, and I took a little bit of a different message from that word solidarity, but it was exactly the key point. I take it as the world is kind of split into 2 groups of people. There are people, I think, like Tedros, as Dr. Malone said, maybe people are not evil. Like maybe not everybody has this evil intent. I think there's a group of people that truly think that the answer is to give up your individuality and just be part of a group. I reject that categorically. I think every individual is unique and of supreme importance of just that one person. And you can see that if you belong to the collective or the group think or the solidarity point of view, they will have no trouble locking you up in your cabin or in your home. That is a group kind of collective solidarity approach, that the group is more important than the individual. At Gold Care, we reject that completely. We think the individual is paramount. Every single individual is 100% important. The doctor-patient relationship, that individual. So I took that word solidarity and I said, wow, the long-term effect of solidarity is that the individual doesn't matter. And we see that because the moment a crisis hits, they're literally taking out, like, is it soldering? Is that the word? Soldering, when they like welded the door shut. And on the cruise ship, they actually locked them in the cabin. So we reject that at Gold Care. But if it's okay with you, let's turn to the science behind it so that people kind of can know what to expect. What I want to share with people overwhelmingly, again, bears repeating, this is not something you should be worried about. You are only here tonight because the media has flooded you with news stories about this. So most people are natural to be either curious or actually genuinely a little bit afraid. And all of those reactions are normal. But the truth is, you shouldn't even have heard about this. Or imagine, a year ago, you were not hearing about this. And yet there was hantavirus a year ago. There's hantavirus for decades. It's been around for a long time. It was rare then. It's rare now. So first of all, do not panic. Do not worry. We've got you covered. The things to look out for or to consider if you're a person who really, is anxious or you want to really be informed. Overwhelmingly, pay attention if you are living in more of a rural area and there's a barn, for example, and you're sweeping at a barn and the dust comes up, probably there are rat droppings. So if those rat droppings have been infected, those rats have been infected by deer mice that could carry the hantavirus. Those rat droppings, when they're dry, they can be aerosolized a little bit and the hantavirus can go up and it can be inhaled. So if you're sweeping at a barn and there were rat droppings that were infected with the hantavirus, you can get exposed. I disagree maybe mildly perhaps with Dr. Malone. I am of the mindset that this is not really human to human transmission. When I looked back at the articles that I'd seen over the years, when I did some research, I am not impressed with the truthfulness, validity that there's human to human transmission. I don't feel confident that they had ruled out common environmental contaminants as the cause. But certainly if there is some human to human transmission, it is uncommon. It is very, very close quarters. Sharing saliva or other bodily fluids, it would be a one-on-one thing. That is the most that you could say. This is not as though even if your neighbor had it over there that you'd be worried, as opposed to SARS-2, right, which caused COVID, which certainly was a respiratory virus. Obviously, people caught it from each other. This is not that. That is not hantavirus. There is no evidence of this respiratory spread human to human. I also want to share, even if I get haters, that I don't believe, and I have not seen any evidence that this has been kind of a weaponized version of the virus, of the hantavirus, that would all of a sudden now really have common human to human transmission. I've seen no evidence of that. Going back to point number one, which is not to have fear, not to panic. If you are in that high risk situation, you're sweeping at a barn, there's dust coming up, maybe there was rat droppings, certainly that would be something to note. If you're living in the Four Corners areas of the United States, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, that area, it's more common there, the hantavirus in the deer mice out there. Now, what are the symptoms people should look for? Or Dana, we would have seen this in our practice, right? It would be like any kind of early viral syndrome, right? So you would have maybe a fever and you'd have body aches, headaches, malaise. It does appear that muscle aches seem to be a little bit more prominent than the typical viral syndrome. But again, this would be a disease that I would only consider if somebody told me that they were in a high-risk situation, right? That they were in an area where there could have been rat droppings and they lived in Arizona or New Mexico, for example. Short of that history, I would never jump to hantavirus as a possibility just because someone comes down with kind of flu symptoms. I would never do it. But if they were in that high-risk situation and then they started to have some of these, achy viral symptoms, I would certainly consider early treatment. And this is the part of the town hall that you won't hear anywhere else because it is certainly considered a bit radical. And so hang on to your seats. I'm going to go to Drew. And when we come back, we're going to talk about treatments for hantavirus.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Gold. This conversation has been so good. It is so informative. And this is exactly what the people need to hear. Turn off CNN, turn off Fox, turn off all the madness. This hantavirus isn't coming after you. It is very, very treatable and very manageable, and extremely unlikely that you're going to get it in the first place, as we heard from Dr. Malone and from you, Dr. Granberg and Dr. Gold. We do have our ebook available. It's in the ticker in the bottom of your screen, goldcare.com/Hanta. And we have some awesome things that would be helpful for you to have in your medicine cabinet if you should need them. Dr. Gold is going to tell us all about them here in just a moment. So we'll go right back to her. Thanks, Dr. Gold.
Here's the part that we at Gold Care, we doctors, are so happy to share with you. And that is kind of a calm approach to disease. You know, when a patient would come into Dr. Granberg in the office or to me in the emergency department, there's a certain pattern to illnesses and a pattern to diseases and a pattern to treatments that we know because of our education and experience. We can recognize and then we can initiate treatment. So even though hantavirus does not have all these randomized controlled studies and all these trials because it's such a rare situation, we can look at the chemistry, the biochemistry of the virus itself. We can say, how does that virus look compared to other viruses? And how have we treated other viruses that kind of looked similar to that? And maybe that's what would work. And for comparison's sake, that's what they did with SARS-2. You know, SARS-2 is right, Dana, there was a SARS-1. I mean, it wouldn't have had the name SARS-2 if it didn't have the name SARS-1. So SARS-2 was very similar to SARS-1. It was 78% identical. So the first thing the scientists did was they tested the things that worked on SARS-1. And chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine had worked very well on SARS-1. So they tested it for SARS-2 and it worked very well for SARS-2 in the early phase especially. So you did the same thing with the hantavirus. The hantaviruses are negative sense single-stranded RNA viruses, very similar to other mRNA viruses. It's a little bit more similar to influenza than the SARS virus, but they're all kind of, you know, they're quite similar, these RNA viruses. So when we looked back at the pathophysiology and the biochemistry of the organism itself, you can see that they rely on the same host cell, like the same cells that are getting sick, the same machinery and the same intracellular pathways that they need to function as COVID or influenza or Zika virus and other viral diseases. They needed the same kind of mechanisms and pathways to replicate themselves. And those same pathways are vulnerable to the same medicines that we've used in other diseases. So for example, if there was a way to study, 1,000 hantavirus patients, which there isn't, at the moment, but if there was, I would be very comfortable predicting that medicines like hydroxychloroquine, over-the-counter medicines like quercetin, medicines like ivermectin would be very effective based on the pathophysiology and biochemistry of the virus and the disease. So that is my opinion. Dr. Granberg, is there anything you'd like to add to that portion of it?
No, I agree with that. I do think that in comparing COVID, I had read a study about HCQ in healthcare in South America. And during 2020, I took one HCQ a week and I saw 2 to 3 COVID people easily a week, if not way more than that, and never really was impacted by that. So, it was a time where that was before the shot and before anything else. And I was researching. It was very difficult to get that, that information, but I did rely on sources that I could find. And then once you understand that the replication and the importance of starting those in early treatment to reduce replication and therefore reduce the amount of illness or the how ill someone is, you can reduce hospitalization and stuff. It really makes you think about the importance of not only early treatment, but quite frankly, now that I'm around people who are more holistically trained and functionally trained, it reminds you that really you can go back 2 or 3 more steps for prevention and prophylaxis and then early treatment. At Gold Care, we have so many ways that we teach people to prime and to optimize their immune system. So that step 4 that you described, the susceptibility of the new host, that we can nip that risk in the bud or reduce it as much as possible. So that was what I was thinking about. And tonight, it was funny. I hope we are still going to play that short clip from Zev Zelenko.
Yes.
That would be really good to see, because it shows that these are people that have applied a lot of thought to these early treatments, and they can make a big difference.
So thank you for reminding us. So we're going to get to Dr. Zelenko's clip in about maybe 5 minutes or so. Let's just run through a little bit more of the science. So from a science perspective, hantavirus does not scare me because it fits into the same kind of general bucket of other RNA viruses that early treatment worked very, very well. Basically, hydroxychloroquine or quercetin and ivermectin, they work kind of differently, but the hydroxychloroquine or quercetin plus zinc kind of makes it almost impossible for the virus to keep reproducing. And ivermectin works in kind of a different pathway when it comes to hantavirus. It inhibits something called the important alpha beta pathway that is necessary for the virus to get inside the cell. So they work kind of differently, but they both have been shown to work in lab dishes. And we would expect, based on studies of influenza and studies of SARS-2, which caused COVID, to work very well, I think, in hantavirus. Here are some of the commonalities and the differences with SARS, with the COVID disease. They both have what's called kind of a biphasic pattern, meaning early on, you get exposed. Again, the major thing is, are you exposed to the rat droppings that have been infected with hantavirus? When you have an exposure, it can take a week to a month till you get sick with the disease. And the early part of the disease is a viral syndrome, right? You're achy, you're febrile, maybe headaches, all that. And then after some period of time, if you didn't have treatment, or your body couldn't fight it off with a good, robust immune system, which we'll get back to, you would then progress to the second phase, which is much more serious. Unlike COVID, hantavirus disease is much more serious. So if you do progress to the later phase, it's quite serious. What that means to me as a physician taking care of patients is that if somebody had this high-risk exposure, I would not hesitate to start them on hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, probably hydroxychloroquine and zinc. The reason is it's a very safe pill. Hydroxychloroquine, super safe. And hantavirus, if it were to progress to the later phase, is actually very, very serious. So that is why one of the reasons we did tonight's town hall is that there may be somebody listening, maybe one person, maybe he'll come down with a hantavirus infection. And I want them to know that if they were in a high-risk situation, they shouldn't hesitate, shouldn't feel funny. They should absolutely start. It's absolutely what Simone, Dr. Gold would do for herself. I'm sure Dr. Nill as well. And so that is an option that we make available to you at Gold Cares. We want you to have these medicines in your medicine cabinet, ready to go if you should need it. It's very important if you are high-risk exposure, again, the geography and exposure to the rat droppings, then you have these medicines at the ready. They should be in your medicine cabinet, ready to go. You shouldn't wait to take them. They should be like very, very quick. There's a lot of, I feel very confident there's a lot of evidence to support that. Plus it's very, very safe. Then Dr. Granberg also mentioned, and so did Dr. Malone, how important it is that you yourself are healthy in the starting point, right? That means your vitamin C, vitamin D, sunlight, all of those good things, in general, maintaining a normal, healthy body weight, being active every day, but just in general, having a good kind of robust immune system. But definitely if you're exposed, vitamin C and vitamin D are also very important. It has to be taken very early. Before that, or in combination with that, it would be very, very helpful to clean the area to make sure that there is none of these rat droppings around, because you don't know if they're infected with hantavirus, right? And there are topical products. This is like so exciting. I can share with you. There are topical products that you use to clear the area and make sure that if there was hantavirus, that you've gotten rid of it. And it turns out there's very safe product that you can use. And we just now today added it to the Gold Care store. And you can buy that and you can find it there. It's also in the ebook that Drew has mentioned, but there's hypochlorous acid, and it comes as a cleanser, like a spray, a disinfectant. It's very safe. It's very effective as a strong antimicrobial that mimics what we have in our bodies all the time. And so we're selling it at the store because it's good for the environment to clean it of any kind of microbes, including hantavirus. And we also sell a nasal spray version because you could use that topically on your skin or here for the inhaling portion. That's very important. So that falls into the disinfecting category, which is like the prevention category, generally for your environment and environmental, decontamination. And then for your own health, vitamin C, vitamin D, and if there's been an exposure, you would definitely want to have hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin available for you. And so we have those things available for you. And I absolutely implore everybody, anybody who's nervous or worried, or especially if you live, in the Southwest region of the country and you're worried, make an appointment. You can have a hantavirus appointment with one of our Gold Care doctors. They know all about this. And just, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I mean, I'm right, Dr. Nill. This is why we built Gold Care, so people could have access to this sort of thing. Yeah.
If they're afraid, they won't make right decisions. And at Gold Care, we have people that will come alongside you, naturopaths, functional meds, allopathic, MDs, DOs, PAs, NPs. And it's actually an interesting time to live, because we can all come together. We can practice faith over fear, facts over fear, and, basically have a plan that works for you and your family, because my preparedness is different than Dr. Gold's, and Dr. Gold's is different than the next person. We do take education very seriously. And I will say, right along the lines of the disinfectant that we had a fantastic grand rounds on chlorine dioxide. And so we also have that nasal spray available as well, and a whole grand rounds for those who were available for that. And all of those recordings and education are in our Wellness U library for our members. So I just wanted to say that learning every day I've come a long way in 5 to 6 years as an allopathic physician who is focused more on treatment. Now I am much more focused on keeping myself healthy. I feel better about what I know. I know a broader range of topics that maybe just I was not immersed in enough in medical school. And so I have a real appreciation for where we are as a Gold Care family, and certainly as a COO, I just have a hunger for knowledge in these areas. So I want to thank you, Dr. Gold, for your tireless efforts in building Gold Care.
Thank you. And right back at you. You work really tirelessly yourself. But for everybody who's listening, we're going to do, I'm going to kind of summarize everything we did. It'll take 1 minute. And then I want to share with you a video by Dr. Zev Zelenko. Many of you know who he is. Some of you do not know who he is. So Dr. Zev Zelenko is widely credited with being the physician who actually taught President Trump about the usefulness of hydroxychloroquine in the very early days, I think February, March of 2020. He happened to live in an area that was a little bit geographically isolated, and people there didn't really want to go to the hospital, and they all trusted him. And he ended up treating a lot of people that lived in close quarters. They all did really well. Came up with something called the Zelenko Protocol. He became a good friend of mine. He's a righteous man. And he was quite fearless, perhaps because he himself had been very sick with cancer and was destined to pass away just a couple of years after COVID came. And so I think he was maybe touched by the Spirit of God, and he just really lived without fear. And he spoke very openly about things. One of the things he spoke about, I mentioned, is he taught President Trump and many people about hydroxychloroquine and early treatment. But he also was very wise as a scientist, and he predicted that other scare tactics and other fear-mongering would come along, that the public health officials would eventually wear out their COVID story, and they'd have to come up with another story. And one of them is hantavirus. And I just want to share with you what he said about that. And I do this to reassure you and remind you that you've really been the victim of a lot of media propaganda. And, this week is hantavirus, next month, next year, it'll be something else. And the main point is not to be afraid. And also that you have other unbiased professionals who are here to help you and come alongside you. So if we'll just go to Dr. Zelenko, and then we'll wrap up after that.
And some of those viruses include all the COVID strains, COVID-19, influenza virus, RSV virus, Marburg virus, Ebola virus, Hantavirus, and there are a few others. The point being is that they all are single-stranded RNA viruses that use the same common pathway in making copies of their genetic material. That's something called RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. That's what I've been talking about for the last 2 years in the context of COVID-19. But if we extrapolate that to think more broadly, then it's the same mechanism of treatment using zinc ionophores and zinc could inhibit all the strains of COVID-19, influenza virus, RSV virus, Ebola virus, Marburg virus, and Hantavirus. This has tremendous amount of national security implications, and I don't think anyone realizes this.
Okay, so for those of you who didn't know Dr. Zelenko, he was an angel really on Earth. He filmed that almost 4 years ago. I actually remember when it came out. I think that was maybe April of 22, I think, sometime around there. I think it was 2022. And basically the mechanism of replication of hantavirus is the same as you saw with SARS-2, COVID, Marburg, Ebola, all of these other viruses. So there's no reason I can come up with why the same treatment wouldn't work, right? And when he said the word zinc ionophores, he means hydroxychloroquine or quercetin. So I encourage anybody who is listening to all the fear that's going on about hantavirus to download or to obtain our ebook that we've written for you, which contains a lot of this. Join Gold Care so you can watch this town hall again. If you're particularly worried, absolutely make a hantavirus appointment. We've got you covered. We've got the great information. If you need the medications, you want to have them at home, which I strongly encourage. I keep them at home. I can assure you of that. And if you're interested in buying the disinfectant that kills these microbes, on contact, or the nasal spray, we've got that for you also in the Gold Care store. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, for not allowing fear to rule your day, and just for being wise, and also for spreading this good information, right? So that your neighbors don't live in fear, so your family doesn't live in fear. And Dr. Granberg, any parting words?
No, you covered it.
Awesome.
No,
and
great.
Then thank you for joining. And then Drew, just if you can bring us out.
Yes, thank you guys so much for such a great conversation. We have the answers for you at Gold Care. Gold Care is the solution to make sure you are informed and have the products you need to take care of these silly little nonsense things that the media wants to scare us with. We've got the Curativa Bay disinfectant on the Gold Care store. We've got the Snoot nasal spray. It's there on the store. If you're a Gold Care member, you get an additional discount on those products. We'd love to have you. goldcare.com/Hanta will get you the ebook and all the information you need. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. God bless, and we'll see you next month for our next town hall. Good night.
Do you feel like the healthcare system is failing you? That's because it is, working exactly as intended to prioritize profits, bureaucracy, and big pharma, while leaving you and your family vulnerable when you need care the most. We understand your frustration. You've been asked to trust a system that feels rushed, impersonal, and biased. You deserve better. That's why we created Gold Care. Here, your values matter, your choices matter, and most importantly, you matter. Gold Care is more than a solution. It's a revolution. Trusted by over 10,000 members nationwide, we've built a system that puts your wellness first. With ethical, independent doctors who work for you, not the system, you'll have access to care that's transparent, trustworthy, and aligned with your values. We understand that stepping away from the familiar can feel daunting, but staying in a system that doesn't truly serve you is even harder. That's why Gold Care offers a healthcare alternative designed to work for you. Whether you're ready to step away from the system entirely or prefer to keep your insurance while seeking the transparent care, ethical doctors, and education you deserve, it's time to stop trusting a system that's failed you. Take control of your health with Gold Care. Join today for $17 a month and become part of a healthcare revolution. Gold Care, built for you, powered by freedom, trusted by thousands.